In order to rally people, governments need enemies. If they do not have a real enemy, they will invent one. And that is the theme of this show, how the Trump administration is inventing enemies, in effect, anyone who doesn't agree with them, and then threatening to bring down the full force of federal law enforcement upon them.
Wow, that's some scary sounding stuff, Dad.
Yeah, I hate to always be scary. I'd love to come and tell you, our democracy is robust and healthy. We can look forward to free and fair elections.
Right.
Our economy is going to soar.
Yeah.
Our rights and liberties are going to be respected.
Right.
I wish I could tell you that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
But you can't.
I can't.
Damn. Okay. Are you ready to get into the first topic, Dad?
I am.
Trump has officially signed National Security Presidential Memorandum 7, also known as NSPM 7, a directive on domestic terrorism that labels certain everyday political beliefs, like, let's say, distrust of government, as possible, quote, indicators of extremism. Civil liberty groups warn it could criminalize dissent and opposition.
Well said. And here's the thing. NSPM 7 has been lost. Another incredible failure of the American media.
Uh-oh.
Yes. Our corporate media has been just utterly deficient in keeping us apprised about the threats to our rights and our liberties and broadly to the survival of America's democratic republic. And NSPM 7 has gotten lost.
That's a mouthful, I have to say.
Yes, in the much less consequential, but, big furor over the indictment of James Comey and the executive order declaring the mythical Antifa a terrorist organization. Unlike the executive order, which doesn't have real teeth and real operational direction since there's no one to direct it against, this is a national security directive on the part of the president, which mobilizes all of federal law enforcement in pursuit of the threats that it outlines. And I'm going to begin by giving you a little bit of historical perspective. Did you ever hear of the Motion Picture Code of 1930?
No.
It codified all the moral prescriptions of 1920s conservatism, the world of Presidents Warren Harding, Calvin Coolidge, and Herbert Hoover. Donald Trump has resurrected those same prescriptions, that same conservative orthodoxy of nearly 100 years ago in a much more insidious way. Not to police the content of films, as reprehensible as that was, and it's been largely, widely discredited, but to criminalize dissent. That is, in this presidential memorandum, the administration is recasting broad swaths of political expression as criminal conspiracies and mobilizing against it the full weight of federal law enforcement as if confronting organized crime. And he's very explicit about that. As I show in my new book right here, Conservative at the Core, this demonstrates once again that Donald Trump is not the exception to American conservatism, but the very scary culmination of 100 plus years of the American conservative movement. The memorandum, NSPM 7, promulgated on the 25th of September, 2025.
I think we need a new name for it, like Scary Number 7.
I like that, yes, right.
The NSP is too much of a mouthful. Yeah. We need something better.
Frightening Number 7.
Put it in the chat if
Repressive
you got a better name.
Number 7, yes.
The terrifying
Number
7. Something like that.
It brands, quote, anti-fascist rhetoric as a threat. What is anti-fascist rhetoric? It could be anything.
Yeah, what the hell does that mean?
Yes, that's the point. This, as we'll see, this memorandum creates all of these catch-all categories that could encompass anything that this administration, this ruling party, finds unacceptable. That is the hallmark of every tight authoritarian regime in the modern history of the world, to define as unacceptable, lawless, dangerous, any kind of speech that doesn't agree with their own political goals and political orthodoxy. That's what makes it so frightening, and that's what makes it so contrary to the free speech protections of the First Amendment. We'll talk about that a little bit later on, which are explicitly designed to encompass broad ranges of speech and to encompass disagreements among us, which is the sign of a healthy democratic republican. The memorandum declares that such anti-fascist rhetoric, quote, has become the organizing rallying cry used by domestic terrorists to wage a violent assault against democratic institutions, constitutional rights, and fundamental American liberties. As triggered not by any criminal activity, but simply by this so-called anti-fascist speech, which you'll see is any speech that doesn't conform to Trump's political interests and political orthodoxy, he ordered, get this, and I can't understand why the media has not been all over this. He's ordered, quote, all federal law enforcement agencies with investigative authority shall adopt strategies similar to those used to address violent crime and organized crime, and to disrupt and dismantle entire networks of criminal activity. Mind you, he's not talking about actual criminal activity. He's simply talking about disagreeable speech that brings down upon individuals and groups the full might of federal law enforcement agencies. This is something truly unique in all of American history. I'll talk a little bit about the Sedition Act, of a wartime act, the most notorious modern crackdown on speech, and show how this is far more insidious. But we are now punishing not unlawful acts, but ideas and movements that the ruling party deems ideologically dangerous. And these prohibitions closely mirror the conservative orthodoxy of nearly 100 years ago of the Motion Picture Code that scholars have long discredited as an egregious violation of speech. But it doesn't criminalize speech, it just tries to control it for entertainment. This is way more serious, and it's also far worse in that the catchwords of Horrible 7 are much worse even than what was in the Motion Picture Code.
Mom's in the chat. She said she likes Orwellian number 7. That's pretty good.
I love Orwellian number 7. Yeah. That's really good. Let's give some examples here.
Okay, Dad.
Of the parallelism and how chilling it is.
Okay.
The code stipulates no picture shall be produced that will lower the moral standards of those who see it. And who decides what those moral standards are?
Trump.
No, this is the code.
Oh, this is the code.
Those who police the code, right?
Right.
And Orwellian 7, I love it, triggers all of this might of the federal government for criminal investigation for speech that represents, quote, hostilities towards those who hold traditional American views on morality. And who is to decide what those traditional American views are? Come on. Trump, the administration.
Oh, you keep
That's the whole point of this. You're missing the whole point.
Why are you getting mad at me?
Because I'm just so frustrated that people have not understood the implications of this.
I was reading the chat. Okay. I thought you were still talking about the 1930s directive.
But that's the whole point, is that there's these catch-all categories, traditional American views on morality, that are to be interpreted solely by Trump and his allies, and that trigger the full law enforcement might of the federal government. The code, back to 1930, insists that, quote, ministers of religion should not be used as comic characters or villains, and religion must not be, quote unquote, lowered in the minds of the audience. Orwellian 7 goes far beyond that. Words, speech that would trigger law enforcement includes, quote, the words anti-Christianity and hostility towards those who hold traditional views of religion. These are, quote, common threads animating this violent conduct. Sam, what is anti-Christianity?
I don't know.
Nobody knows. It's anything that Trump finds republic. For example, defending gay and lesbian rights could be considered anti-Christianity. Hostility towards those who hold traditional American views on religion. We've talked about this before. What the right wing regards as traditional views of religion are a complete distortion of religion and the teachings of Jesus, focusing on the most peripheral things like gender identity, homosexuality, abortion, and ignoring the grand bulk of Judeo-Christian teachings, which focus on greed, on wealth and those great dangers, on telling the truth, on caring for the sojourner, the poor, the vulnerable. So if you don't agree with how the right wing defines Christianity and religion, guess what? You could be branded as a criminal. Back to the code, it demands that, quote, the sanctity of the institution of marriage in the home shall be upheld, unquote. Orwellian 7 bars as criminal, quote, hostility towards those who hold traditional American views on the family. Sam, what are traditional American views on the family?
White, straight,
husband-led.
Right.
Remember, Trump's darling Pete Hegseth doesn't even believe, or at least posted a video which indicated not only should women obey their husbands, and, their darling Charlie Kirk said, hey, if Taylor Swift marries Travis Kelce, she's got to forget about all this feminism and just obey her husband. So if you don't think a woman should obey her husband, that could be a violation of traditional American views.
Don't Trump and Hegseth both violate traditional family views? They're both adulterers. Trump slept with a porn star. Hegseth impregnated a woman who wasn't his wife. I mean, they could be the two leading candidates for non-traditional family values, right?
Absolutely right. As we said, we need a new word. We can't even call this hypocrisy anymore. You're right on the money. The code bans what framers viewed as the racial extremism of its time, noting that, quote, miscegenation, sex relationships between black and white races is forbidden, unquote. Orwellian 7 similarly prescribes what the administration views as, quote unquote, extremism on race, the modern version. And we know exactly what they considered to be extremism on race: support of affirmative action, support for diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, and claims that discrimination is systematic within our society. So if you support any of these things, you can run afoul of the law enforcement might of the federal government. The 1930 code forbids the portrayal of, quote, sexual perversion, and we know what they meant by that in those days, right?
Homosexuality.
Right, or any inference to it. Orwellian 7 sweeps in, quote, extremism on gender, which we know from this administration would include expressions of support for LGBTQ plus persons.
There's no P in it, but close.
Right. The code stipulates that the use of the flag shall be consistently respectful.
People are asking what you're reading from. You're reading from the 1930s one, or you're reading from the current memorandum? Both. Gotcha.
When I say the code,
it's
1930.
Okay.
When I say Orwell 7, it's the current.
Gotcha.
So the code stipulates, quote, the use of the flag shall be consistently respectful. And, of course, Orwellian 7 goes far beyond this to list among its triggers for law enforcement activity the catch-all category of anti-American expression, which could mean anything that goes against the policies of the administration. This Orwellian 7 is by far the most extreme crackdown on free speech, at least since the Espionage Act of 1918, which was adopted during wartime. We're not at war right now, and was shortly repealed once the wartime emergency was over in 1921. But it goes far beyond the Sedition Act, which focused on criticism of the government and criticism of the war. In other words, focusing on policy. What makes this so frightening is that it outlaws ideas. You don't even have to explicitly be criticizing this administration or its policies. If your speech is interpreted by them as anti-Christian or anti-American or extreme on gender or extreme on race. They also include anti-capitalism here, which can include any critique of big business or any defense of environmental regulations. It, for the first time, criminalizes ideas, and that's what makes it so frightening. And in support of this, they offer absolutely no causal link between these so-called triggers and actual political terrorism. And as we know, the empirical evidence points in another direction. A 2024 study by the Department of Justice, National Institute of Justice, found that since 1900, far-right extremists have committed far more ideologically motivated homicides than far-left actors, unquote. They found that far-right extremists, quote, took more than 520 lives versus 78 for far-left extremists, unquote. That's a ratio of nearly 7 to 1. And you know what the administration, just before it issued Orwellian 7, did to this study?
No.
They purged
it. Yeah, I did know.
They erased it, so you can't find it
I know.
anymore.
Mom says that Orwellian Memorandum 7 is a little bit more clear. But that's a little bit of a mouth. That's a little bit of a mouthful.
I like Orwellian 7.
The Orwellian. It's a little unclear what we're talking about, but
either one is really good.
We'll keep brainstorming.
Yeah, it is critical that this memorandum be rescued from obscurity and brought to our attention.
What is your hypothesis? Why do you think the media has not brought this to the forefront like you think they should have? What's your hypothesis?
I think there's just so much going on,
right,
that it's easy to miss any one thing.
Fair.
But, the more fearful side of me indicates, that maybe we now have a thoroughly corporate-controlled media is just afraid of going after Trump on something like this. Maybe. They're fearful, that federal law enforcement's going to come down on them, or they'll lose their broadcast license, or, their editorialists or reporters will be prosecuted. This is scary stuff.
Yeah.
Trump is the most powerful person in the world. He commands the most powerful law enforcement apparatus in the world. It's not just the FBI, Sam. It's ICE, which has now been enormously augmented. It's the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration. alcohol, tobacco, firearms, and explosives, and a host of other federal law enforcement agencies that could be deployed. So it may be just abject fear on the part of the corporate-controlled media.
Now, is there anything we can do about this? Because, as we said, this isn't a executive order, so can it be shut down by the courts? Can it be overturned by the next president, like an executive order, or not?
It can be overturned by the next president, but that's a long way away.
But
and a lot of damage could be done in 3+ years.
So a judge can't come in and rule it unconstitutional?
Yes, I think I'm not a lawyer, and I always
You're not?
No. And I didn't stay at a Holiday Inn Express, but I have studied these matters, and absolutely, the court has a right to declare something like this unconstitutional. And by the way, I pointed out several ways in which it's even more insidious than the discredited Sedition Act of 1918. The other thing that makes it so much more insidious, that was an act of Congress, right?
Right.
This is an initiative by one person, solely by the President of the United States. Didn't have to do any debating, compromising, negotiating. He just had to issue it.
Now, why did they pick it as a national security presidential memorandum and not an executive order?
Because a national security presidential memorandum has much more force, because it specifically directs our national security apparatus on what they must do. Executive orders tend to be more general, like the one against Antifa. This actually mobilizes federal law enforcement, instructs them to act on these triggers like anti-Christianity, anti-Americanism, disrespect for religion, racial or gender extremism, anti-capitalism. This actually mobilizes agencies, so it's much more insidious than the executive order.
And I know you say, when you're trying to fight back against something, you hit the streets, you talk to your representatives, but is there anything unique people can do to combat this? Or
got to go to the courts, and it strikes me as an absolutely clear unconstitutional abridgment of First Amendment protections. The First Amendment was framed and intended to authorize a broad range of speech. If only speech that was consistent with the orthodoxy and political interests of the regime was permissible, you wouldn't need a First Amendment, right?
Right.
It would be totally unnecessary. The whole point of a First Amendment is to allow a broad range of speech, including speech that challenges and is critical of the ruling government. Remember, this came in the wake of a revolution. And, of course, the purpose of the revolution was to free the North American colonists from the dictatorial control of the British king. And critical to that was a free speech, the right to petition your government, and a free press. And the framers were crystal clear about the critical importance of free speech to their new democratic republic. Thanks for watching our video. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and become a member today.